Okay, hello and welcome back everyone to the road to 2000. We had a little bit of a false start there. I expected a lot out of my laptop here at home trying to stream remotely, and we had a little bit of lag when I first went live. But we're back and everything should hopefully be working a little bit better. So, as I was saying the first time, we are going to go over chess puzzles tonight. And it's not the kind of chess puzzles that you are the most familiar with, most likely. It's not the type of puzzles you're going to find on Lichess or chess.com in their tactics trainers. I'm talking about composed chess studies. And beyond that, we're even going to look at some studies and some compositions that go beyond what you would expect from a normal quote-unquote chess puzzle. So without further ado, we're a little bit late now, so let's just get into it. So I wanted to start with this composition, which I've actually shown before on the channel. So this is actually a puzzle composed by me. So I came up with this one, and I just wanted to start with it briefly. I've shown it before, and I just want to show this as an example of what a chess composition might look like. So right off the bat, you know, this isn't what you're going to find in the Lichess Tactics Trainer. Of course, pieces are strewn about in really crazy places all over the board, and the goal of this type of puzzle from the composer's point of view is to come up with some kind of interesting idea that makes it worth the effort. Obviously, this isn't going to be the most useful to find a tactical theme in your own games. It's more about, you know, the beauty of solving it for yourself. And so if you do want to try and solve this puzzle, go ahead and pause the video now, because I'm not going to focus too much on this one. It's not the best puzzle in the world because I composed it, and I'm not a professional chess problem composer. But just to give you an example of what we're kind of dealing with, you know, this is different than a normal tactic because it is such a crazy position, and the answer should be equally kind of unique and interesting. So in this case, we start off with the normal move, the knight check, and now the crazy move, queen g1. And the point here is that black was threatening to checkmate the white king, and we need to divert this queen in order to win. And sorry, I'm doing a terrible job of presenting this puzzle. It was actually mate in 7 for white to move in the initial position. But just kind of using this one as a jumping off point. I want to show off my own puzzle. And so we pin the queen to the black king. The queen must capture. There's actually only one other legal move, and that's queen to e3. That obviously fails. Sorry, 2 legal moves. Rook d5 is also playable, and the knight moves are playable, but they get checkmated. So queen takes, and now if you want to try to solve it from here as well, this is mate in 5. But the puzzle continues without further ado. Knight b5 check, knight takes c3, knight b5 check, and finally, last chance to try to solve the puzzle for yourself. What was the point of everything? Well, the point now is that this queen is out of play on g1, no longer threatening to checkmate us on c2, and we can play the move c3, effectively sealing the coffin on this black king in the center. And black is now helpless to prevent the checkmate. And so no matter what's played, we get knight c7, and that is the checkmate. That ends the study. So obviously, this puzzle is a little bit convoluted, but that's kind of the point for a lot of these studies. And so hopefully, you guys enjoy that one a little bit. But now let's jump into the really crazy ones. So this position, you know, it's pretty interesting. You know, the king's stuck in the center, the knight hopping all around like that, and a queen sacrifice. Pretty weird for a chess position, but we can get far weirder and far more interesting. Don't you worry. And so without further ado, let's take a look at another traditional chess puzzle in the form of this one. So when I say a traditional chess puzzle here, I'm talking about the kind of puzzles that are still like white to move and win, or black to move and win, that sort of thing. And that's what we have here. So this position, white is on the move, and white can win this game. So you guys at home, take a minute, see if you guys can find it, and then I'll get into the solution and how to find something like a solution in a puzzle like these. So go on, take a second, and I'll let the chat catch up here and give me some of their ideas. So white to move and win in this position, where black has all of their pieces remaining. Rafael Luis says h3. So give me an idea here. h3, I think you're going to get killed, right? Black has the full army. Play h3. Black's going to move the knight, start promoting, start detangling all these pieces. And so yeah, NJF has the correct first move, of course. So the key here is to realize that black is almost completely stuck despite having all of the pieces on the board. So obviously black is moving downwards, so all these pawns are locked into place by the remainder of the pieces. You know, all of them have a piece in front of them. This knight is also immobilized by the other pieces. This bishop is immobilized by these two pawns. This rook is immobilized by the four pieces around it. This rook, this bishop, this king, all as well immobilized. And the only piece that's truly free is this knight on e1. So white's going to play king takes e1 here. And after that, much to black's chagrin, black is not in stalemate and is not drawing the game because, of course, this queen has one legal move. It's locked in by these surrounding pieces, but this one open square does give black a legal move, and so black is going to have to play queen to a1. And unfortunately for black, moving this queen doesn't really release any of the other pieces. So now we have to continue here. We have to continue. So how can we continue and try to get the checkmate? How can we continue this? Oh, I'm messing up the cropping a little bit. That's okay. And wow, you guys are just too clever for this puzzle. So you find the first move pretty easily here. You find king takes e1 because otherwise the knight's going to move, and then, you know, you promote the pawn as black, you start getting all the pieces into the game, and there's no way white can survive. But the second part of this puzzle, I think, is sort of the harder part, where you have to realize now, okay, so as white, I've got black moving back and forth forever and ever and ever. How do I actually checkmate? And since black has so many pieces and this king is so well fortified, you know, a queen is actually not going to get the job done here. A queen and a king are not going to be enough to checkmate this king when all of these squares surrounding the king are defended, you know, so well, right? You can't really break in with a queen and a king. So you need a piece that's a little bit better at jumping, of course. So that's how you can kind of arrive at the idea of promoting to a knight, which of course has to be done. And then the people in the chat room have actually gone all the way through to the end, or perhaps guessed, and found the key difference to this puzzle. So there's a question: should white play h4 or h3, or does it matter? If you want to try to figure it out for yourself, pause here because the chat room is way ahead of me on this one. Of course, you need to play the move h3. And how did the tactics work out? Well, you had to calculate pretty deeply on this one. Of course, black has only one legal move in all of these positions, and white has only one option as well. We create our knight on the 8th rank, and now we begin our knight hops, and we have to start taking some pieces. So, how are we going to checkmate this black king? Well, we can't checkmate it with knight takes on on d3 here because this rook defends. Same with e2, and a2 is going to be too tough to get to. It's just too well defended, so there's no access points, and that of course leaves the g6 square. So we need to play knight takes g6 in some manner in order to win the game. But first, of course, we have to remove a couple pawns. So that's why we're taking this long route. We're going to take here. We're going to maneuver and capture this one. And still, even with these two pawns gone, black cannot escape his fate. And after knight a5, black is zugged. Must play queen to a1, and we get knight takes b3 checkmate. So this one, pretty unique, pretty interesting. How a single king and pawn at first and then knight later are enough to defeat Black's entire army in this specific setup. Really, really interesting stuff. But I'm not happy, even with these crazy compositions. We can get stranger. We can get more unique. So let's now take a look at something called Retrograde Analysis puzzles. So most puzzles, even compositions like this, all start where you would expect at the beginning of the puzzle. But one of my favorite types of chess puzzles that's non-standard, rather than just crazy compositions, are these retrograde analysis puzzles. And what makes them interesting is that they start at the end. And so this position is actually the final position of this chess puzzle. And the challenge is to use retrograde analysis, or sort of, you know, oh God, I don't know how to define retrograde analysis. It's when you start at the end and have to think backwards, more or less. Not the real definition, obviously. But essentially, that's the heart of it. So we're starting at the end, and the challenge is, this is the position after move 4. How was it achieved? So you have the final position. You start from the initial position in chess, and you have to try to figure out, how did we get here? And when I say after move 4, I have to be very, very specific. It is after Black's 4th move that we have achieved this position. So White has played 4 moves, and Black has played 4 moves. So next up would be White's 5th move, which could be anything. Knight f3, any move could be played here. And so if you guys are in here in the live chat, go ahead, take a moment and try to ponder it over, and then I'll sort of walk you through some kind of a solving process. And we'll go step by step, try and figure out how we can find a solution. But while you guys are getting acquainted with this puzzle and starting to think about it, I want to talk to you a little bit about retrograde analysis puzzles. There is a man by the name of Raymond Sullivan who was one of the first to really popularize these kinds of puzzles in a series of books that he did with the character Sherlock Holmes. So if you guys are interested in these kinds of puzzles, I would highly recommend checking out some of those books. I think Raymond Sullivan actually passed away a few years back, but really interesting puzzles in those books. And I wanted to give his legacy a little bit of a shout out here. So Isaac actually has the right answer, but the YouTube auto mod system doesn't allow it in the chat. And so since Isaac solved it so quickly, I'm fairly confident he had seen this puzzle before. So I'm not going to show that one. Going to keep it hidden for the other viewers here to keep taking a look at it. So of course, if you've seen the puzzle before, you're going to know the answer. Please don't spoil it for anybody. Oh, and good morning. Gamordes has a question on the previous one about the pawn capturing the knight. So I think you were looking at the board backwards. If you rewind, then the black pawns were moving downwards, so they couldn't capture. If they were moving upwards, could have captured, but they were stuck moving down the board. All right, so the chat seems reasonably stumped on this one for the moment. So let's take a look and just start playing some moves, right? Let's start playing some moves. Don't forget, this is our goal here. So let's take note of the features. We have the white pawn on e4. The white bishop on f1 is actually missing. This black pawn on d7 is also missing. And we have the black pawns shifted to c6 and e6. And not to be misleading here, we of course don't know that it's actually the d pawn that got captured. The d pawn could have recaptured on one of these squares, for example. We just know currently black has a pawn on c6 and e6, no pawn on the d file, and white is missing a bishop on f1. So this is a lot to try to achieve in 4 moves, or at least it would be until you just start playing it out. Is there only one way? There is, in fact, only one way, Raphael, to do it in 4 moves exactly, 4 complete moves. So let's start with some things that are not the solution. So what's the first move? Well, obviously, white needs to move the e-pawn. No other pieces were moved in the final position, so we should move the c-pawn. I see no reason to play e3 yet. We're just trying to get a good feel for the puzzle. So let's think about playing e4 here. So we're going to play e4, and then as black, you know, the d pawn's gone. We have the pawn shifted to c6 and e6. It makes sense to try and just set up the position, right? So we're going to play e6. Now we need to get rid of this bishop and get rid of this d pawn and put this pawn to c6. And we have 3 full moves to do it. So, chat room, who has any ideas on what to do in this position here? Oh, and we're lagging a bit, apparently. I shut off the computer to make sure we're all on the up and up here. Had the engine running for no reason. The engine's not going to solve this puzzle, so I don't know why I had it running. But, yeah, I think we should be good now. It stopped now. All right. Thank you, Abhinav. So Raphael has an interesting idea. So rather than actually try and capture the d-pawn with something like this, Raphael perhaps realized this is going to take way too long, right? If we do this, we've achieved the position, but this is actually after 5 full moves. So Raphael came up with a really great idea, and Abhinav came up with a really great idea to save some time on this idea. So Abhinav's idea, or sorry, Raphael's idea was to capture on e6. And this way, we have achieved the position. There's only one problem now, and that is we achieved the position after 3 full moves. And with 1 move apiece, passing, of course, is not allowed in chess, and so we're going to have to ruin our beautiful position. And now Abhinav's idea was essentially the same. It was to put the bishop on b5 and capture on c6. But this, again, has the same problem. It's only been 3 full moves, not 4 full moves. And so this is actually not a real solution. This isn't going to be good enough. And of course, you know, passing's not allowed. We have to ruin the position somehow, right? So we need to be a little bit more clever than this. So my first thought, at least, when approaching this was, well, why don't I try wasting a tempo with white? I'll play something like e3. And then we'll try to do, you know, something similar here. And with this, I've achieved the position after 3.5 moves, not 4 full moves. So of course, in this position, it is black to play, and our goal position is after move 4, and it is white's turn here, not black's turn. So we haven't quite done it still. So I've sort of set you guys up with the obvious points of the puzzle. These are the things that you can sort of intuitively work out, but the puzzle wouldn't be that interesting if all you had to figure out is that you're capturing on e6. So we need something even crazier. So how can we do it, guys? How can we do it? How can we find 4 full moves to achieve our final position? And I'll put that final position up on the board for you for a few more seconds. So now's a good point. Now that you have some background on how to start the thinking process on the puzzle, now would be a good point to pause again if you don't want it spoiled, because I'm going to start giving away some pretty big hints here. So NJF keeps saying bishop a6, but of course, any way of losing the bishop like this is going to be way too inefficient because black still has a d-pawn in this position. And so even if you got to here, this would be 4 full moves, but black still has the d-pawn, of course. All right, so let me start giving away some hints then. So we know some things about the puzzle. We know we have 4 moves to achieve our goal, no more and no less. And we know that 1 move as black has to be spent on playing the move e6, and 1 move has to be spent on playing the move c6, right? There's no way to get around this. We have to play both of these moves. Now, how do I know that? Well, if the pawns didn't move from e7 and e6, then they would have to be captured on their initial squares, and we just can't do that in 4 moves. And so Levy has a very interesting idea. So we know that one move is spent on each of these moves, putting the pawn on e6, putting the pawn on c6. We don't know what happened to the d pawn yet, but we know for a fact black has spent time on these two moves. What else do we know for a fact? Well, we know for a fact that white spends at least one turn moving this pawn out to e4, and at least a second turn developing this bishop to, some square, and at least a third turn sacrificing it for something else. And then we actually need to waste a fourth tempo, which we could do by moving this pawn to e3 and then e4, or we could do by moving an extra turn with our bishop somehow. So the question is, we've seen that e4, e6, bishop c4, c6, bishop takes, pawn takes is not going to be good enough because it's an odd number of moves. It's 3 moves, and we can't reset to our initial position. So the trick is to find out, with these 2 moves in mind, to find 2 other moves for black that get us back to the initial position. And of course, this means that black's other 2 moves have to be moving back and forth. There's no other way to have an even number of moves and, get back to the same position. So black has to do something like knight h6, knight g8, something like queen e7, queen d8, bishop d7, bishop c8, something like that in order to get the position. And so that is the massive hint that I have for you. 2 of black's moves are e6 and c6, and black's 2 other moves have to be moving some piece back and forth. Now the question is, what piece is that going to be? So Raphael has another interesting idea to combine with Levy's. Now that we know that black has to move back and forth with his piece, we know that this d-pawn cannot have moved. This d-pawn simply cannot have moved, and that tells us that we must be capturing it on d7. And that is going to lead us directly to the solution. Let's take a look. We have e4, and I'm going to start with e6 to keep this diagonal open, bishop b5, and now who from this position can tell me the solution to the puzzle? Who can tell me the solution? We have to move some piece back and forth to get the position after 4 full moves. All right, I believe in you people. I think you can do it. I think you've got it from here. So everybody knows we have to take on d7 and play c6 after. The question is, what is the passing move for black? How can you effectively pass? And with that, I'm going to start going over the wrong answer I saw in the chat, which is everybody saying queen e7. And of course, this one is not quite good enough for the simple reason being, it has to be a legal game of chess. And after bishop takes d7, unfortunately, we must capture this piece. And now white would have to move some other piece, and we actually have quite a bit of work to do to get back to our initial position. This, of course, would be 5 full moves. 5 full moves. So how can we make it so that this check doesn't ruin our day? Yes, Abhinav has the correct answer. Isaac in the chat also dropping some helpful hints. King to e7 is the key. And now we take off the d-pawn, and after the move c6, of course, the last move of the puzzle, drumroll, is bishop e8, king takes e8, and we have achieved on move 4 our goal position. And this is the only way to get there in 4 moves. Just to show you one more time, we're going to count 1 move by white, 1 move by black, move 2, move 3, and move 4. There you are. So really clever stuff, these retrograde analysis puzzles. Now I'm going to show you another kind of retrograde analysis puzzle that I found to be very interesting. It's a pretty famous one, so if you're at all familiar with retro puzzles, you'll probably have seen this one as well. And then we're going to move into some puzzles I can almost guarantee nobody in the chat room has seen, and I'm very excited for it, very excited. So the question in this puzzle is pretty obvious. It's, where's the white king? What happened to that guy? So the setup for this puzzle is basically we have taken some legal chess position. There was a legal chess position, and we have hidden the white king. So the white king is somewhere on this board. We've just made him invisible. So the puzzle is, can you figure out in this legal chess position, where is the white king? Where has he gone? And then, of course, a little bit of explanation as to how he got there. That is the puzzle. So if you want the puzzle from, the pure initial, with no hints, there it is. Where is the white king, and how did he legally get there? And yeah, Levi in the chat, sorry, I was calling him Levy. Been watching too much Twitch chess. Levi in the chat has seen this before. And yeah, I would argue this is one of the most famous retro puzzles. But after this, we're going to get into the real deep stuff. A6 has been suggested. So right away, I'm going to start dropping some hints here, because I think a lot of people have seen this one before. Let's start dropping some hints. So what do we notice? We notice that this king is in check, right? Hopefully we all notice this. So the key is to start, figuring out what are the constraints we're working with. Well, the black king's in check, so you have to ask yourself, how did it get put into check? How was the black king in check? What was white's last move? Well, this bishop obviously did not come from this diagonal, because there's a rook in the way, and it's not like the bishop could have captured a piece to put black into check. And so the question, chat room, is how was black in check? That is your starting point. That's where you start thinking with this one. How do we put the black king into check? Legally, of course. This is a legal chess position with the king for white being invisible. So how is black in check? So Alex has suggested A3. Abhinav has suggested B3. So of course, I'm sorry, I apologize. I might have misled you. The position is black to move, and white's king is missing. Position is black to move, and white's king is missing. And so of course, having the white king on B3 would be illegal, because number one, white would be in check. Number two, white would be in an illegal double check. There would be no way to construct that. So the question is, where's white's king? So what am I talking about as far as this check? Well, of course, we have put the king into check via discovery. The king is in a discovered check because our king likely used to be on B3 and then moved off, either to A3 or C3. So there you go, puzzle solved. It's either on A3 or C3. But of course the puzzle is not solved because there is only one place this king could be. And that's where the real challenge begins. How do we determine whether or not the king is on C3 or A3? How can we figure this out? So with that hint, chat room, does anybody have the solution? I'm thinking maybe not, unless I give you guys a lot of time. So if you want to try to figure it out from there, go ahead and pause the video and unpause with some other stuff. But so how do we figure out whether it's on A3 or C3? Well, it has to do with this seemingly impossible double check from our king being on B3, right? Our king had to be on B3 so it could move and deliver this check to the black king. We know that for a fact. It had to be on B3. But how did the king come to be in this strange looking double check on B3? That's the challenge. So you use this double check against the king on B3 to try and figure out some way that the position could have happened from here, and then that'll tell you which way the king had to move, whether it went to A3 or C3. So how do double checks happen? Well, they happen when a piece is suddenly removed, right? When a piece is removed, usually you move a piece out of the way and that results in a check. Sorry, that's how discovered checks happen. And so a double check usually happens when, you move one piece and then attack the king with that same piece. But there's actually a second way we can put a king into double check. and it's using a pretty interesting and pretty unique rule in the game of chess. So, with those pretty hefty hints, does anybody have an idea as to what I might be talking about? Does anybody have an idea? I think Isaac's got this one. And yes, Alex has the right answer. The king, of course, must be on c3 in this position. And to show you how it happens, I'm going to reveal this perfectly legal chess position. So nothing out of the ordinary here. All these pieces are on very normal squares. Nobody's in check, nobody's in double check. But here, you can imagine that black played the move bishop d5 check. White wanted to get out of check and played the move c4. And then, of course, black takes en passant, putting this king into this seemingly impossible double check. And now white plays, of course, king takes c3, check to the black king. And we have our location of the white king. And this is the only way you can actually place this white king. It cannot be anywhere else. You can't do any funny en passant stuff on the other side because the bishop is checking from this side. And so en passant and king takes gives you our location of the white king. It belongs right there on c3. And funny story for the people in the chat room, when I was setting up this puzzle on my Lee chess study, I wasn't quite sure how to set up a position without a white king. So this is actually anti-chess. Nobody saw it coming, but this is actually anti-chess. And of course, black wins by force with this series of moves, just so you all know. Fun fact. Okay, with that, I am going to stop doing these pure retrograde puzzles and introduce yet another super interesting rule. So these are the puzzles I'm pretty confident nobody in the chat room has seen before. So now that we're all super comfortable with chess positions where you can't see one of the kings, take a look at this one. Take a look at this one. And what this is a really interesting Kriegspiel puzzle. So not quite chess, it's a chess variant puzzle. And what is Kriegspiel? Well, you don't really need to understand the full game to understand this puzzle, which is why I selected it. But essentially, all of your opponent's pieces are completely invisible. And for the purposes of this puzzle, whenever you make a move, there is some arbiter who tells you if your move is legal, if your move is illegal, because there's like a piece in the way or something. And the arbiter tells you if you've captured something. The arbiter also will tell you if you have put the enemy king into check. So you don't know where the king is, but the arbiter will tell you if you've put the king into check and from which direction you've put it into check. So for example, let's take a look at one possibility here. Let's say the black king was on a1. So if you as the white player tried the move rook f1, it would be legal. The arbiter would tell you rook f1, horizontal check. The king has been put into check from the horizontal position. Now, if you played the move bishop d4, the arbiter would tell you bishop d4, diagonal check, long diagonal check in this case. And so those are the rules we're dealing with. We don't know where any of the black pieces are. We do know these little bits of information that the arbiter tells us if we have a legal pawn capture, tells us if we've captured anything, and it tells us if we've put the enemy king into check and from which direction. That's what we know after every move. In this initial puzzle, it is actually checkmate in 2 by force, and we don't know anything about where the black king is, where any other black pieces might be. And that is the puzzle. So, your job is to determine a way to checkmate in 2 regardless of where the black pieces are. Not such an easy task. Not such an easy task. So, chat room, if everybody understands the puzzle, go ahead, take a moment here, and try and figure out some potential ideas. Try and figure out some potential ideas. So this is like Battleship, except it's chess. Kind of. It's called Kriegspiel. It's an incredibly fun game. and it's incredibly interesting for chess puzzles. Where is the black king? That's the question, NJF. We don't know. We don't know. Could be almost anywhere. So of course, NJF's rather obvious question is actually a great place to start with the puzzle. So, as my first hint, we're going to try to determine where this black king possibly could be. So of course, you know, it's white to move, so black is not presently in check, and black, of course, this king cannot be on a square where our pieces are, so that narrows it down. Of course, we have a lot of squares on the board already under control. I'm not going to bother to highlight them all, of course, or maybe I am. So of course, we have all of these squares either under control or occupied, right? So many squares under control or occupied. Just looking at all the pieces, right? We just control so many gosh darn squares. So that doesn't leave many places for this black king to be. So let's highlight first the unoccupied squares and unattacked squares. So these are the squares that aren't occupied by any white pieces and aren't attacked by any white pieces. So this is a good starting point for where the king could be. So who can identify a potential problem square here? And we'll see if we can do something about it. What could a problem square be for us? What could a problem square be? So we don't know which of these squares the black king is on. It looks as though the black king could be on any of them. So Jacques says h8, and I would actually argue that h1 could be the problem square. Now, what's the reason for that? Well, on all these other squares, black would always have a legal move, right? On c4 or c6, black could capture the bishop, for example. On h5, it could capture the h6 pawn. h8, it moves to h7. h7, it can take h6. These squares obviously all connected. But h1, there's no legal moves for that black king. So if we try to play some kind of move that influences, like the c4 square, like this person with the name I can't read says, if we play something like rook f4, the king on h1 would be stalemated. Of course, it's not mate in 2 if you stalemate your opponent, so we could potentially not solve the puzzle there. But it turns out we can actually eliminate the h1 square. Now, why can we eliminate the h1 square? Well, because black could not have played a previous move. We could not have played a legal previous move with the king being on h1. And Great Wolf has another great thing that perhaps is what I should have started with. We already know that the black king is down to one of these locations, but what about the rest of the black pieces? Where are the rest of the black pieces? And so that is probably the first thing we should look at here. And so how do we know how many black pieces are left? Well, you take a look at this rather unique pawn structure for white, and you start to realize that quite a few pawn captures have been played. So for example, 1 pawn capture, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pawn captures. Of course, there are only 16 pieces on a chessboard, so we do actually know for a fact that the king is the only piece remaining for black. Now, as I was saying, we can eliminate the h1 square because there would not be a legal previous move for the chess game if the king was on h1. We are told that we captured them all by the arbiter, but more importantly than that, just to achieve this position, the pawn has to move diagonally, and so they've all been captured. We know that just by looking at the position, regardless of any information given. Wouldn't c4 and c6 be possible? Yes, so we've got those on the board. But h1, not possible, and the reason for that is we control every square around this king twice. And what that means is that this king could not have come from any of these squares, because these squares would have all been defended no matter what white's previous move was. No matter what white's previous move was, the king could not have come from there, because that square would have been defended anyways. Hopefully that makes sense. So h1 is effectively eliminated. Not the same with h5, because you can imagine the king was on h4, white played queen g3 check, black played king h5. That would be legal. That would be legal. So we have all of these squares left on the board, and it doesn't look like we can eliminate them anymore. So the question is, how can we checkmate the king by force regardless of where this king is? So how do we go about solving this now that we've eliminated h1 and we are sure that the king is the only piece left on the board? That means the king is on c4 or c6 because anywhere else could be a mate in 1. So not necessarily, Dominic. The puzzle is that you should be able to force checkmate no matter where the king is, and in at most 2 moves. So you sort of have to checkmate all of these kings at once. Of course, though, after your first move, you can potentially get more information on where the black king is located, and you can use that to adapt your second move depending on where it is. So step 1 is basically locate the black king. Step 2 is checkmate the black king no matter where it's at. So what tools are at our disposal? Well, of course, we are told if we put the black king into check, so we should be looking at moves that could potentially put the black king into check. And we are also told if the black king captures one of our pieces. First of all, it disappears, and and second of all, we're told that it disappears. So those are our 2 main tools for locating the black king. So a few things can happen. Number 1, we can move and we're not told anything. We didn't put the king into check and the black king doesn't capture one of our pieces. Number 2, we move, we're not told anything, and then we're told that the black king captures one of our pieces. That's really easy, obviously, because we know exactly where the king is, because it captured one of our pieces. Or number 3, we move and we're told that we put the king into check, and from which direction we put it into check. So using those 3 things, you have to sort of locate where this king is. So queen g1 removes a lot of squares. That's true. So queen g1 would be a pretty informative move. Either we're told we've put our opponent into checkmate, in which case, great, we did it, or we're not told anything, and we know that the black king is on one of these 5 squares. So then the question is, do we have a checkmate after black's next move? Well, if we aren't told anything after black's next move, we know it has to have moved between h7 and h8, because it didn't capture a piece, and black's only legal moves all capture pieces on these other 3 squares, and we can play queen g7 mate, which is great, so we did it there. But unfortunately, what happens if black plays king takes h6? Do we have a checkmate there? I'm not so sure that we do. Not so sure that we do. We might, but I really don't think so. Rook h2, you think? In the initial position? So Abhinav has an interesting idea. Abhinav wants to try to play h7. So we might not be able to play h7, but we can try to play h7. Now, why might not we be able to play it? Well, it could be illegal if the king is on h7. So we could try it. The arbiter would tell us that h7 is legal, and then we could play queen g7 mate, or after we try it, it would get played if it is legal, and then we would have more information. But the question is, do we have checkmate after h7 if the king isn't on h7? Do we have checkmate? And I'm not sure that we do. I'm not sure that we do for many of these potential king positions. For example, if the king is on h8, we play h7 and then king takes h7. I don't think we have a checkmate there, just to name one example. So I'm not super sure how to give more hints than this for the puzzle without just giving away some really big details. So if you do want to try to solve this one on your own, I would recommend it. But I am going to start giving away some pretty big stuff now. Some pretty big stuff. So, obviously, we know the king is in one of these three spots. And so we want sort of each of our different things, each of our different bits of information that we can get to tell us, to identify one of, these locations. So, right now, there's not much difference, not much way for us to tell the difference between a king moving between h8 and h7 and a king moving between b1 and c1. So this is a key problem that we need to solve. For example, if we did play something like rook h2 and then black plays some move, we don't know what it is, and we're not told anything, we're not sure if black just played king h8 or if black just played king b1. And you can't checkmate both of those kings at the same time, without that information, right? You can checkmate one of them, but you have to, it's kind of a 50-50 guess, right? You don't know where it is. So that's the problem with rook h2, is because, oh my god, it's because we need some way to identify where the black king is, and after rook h2, there's no way for us to determine the difference between a king moving between c1 and d1 and a king moving between h8 and h7. So you have to use these tools to locate the black king with your first move. Jared says knight g5 then, and this is closer to the right idea. We need to somehow eliminate this king h8, king h7 shuffling maneuver, so that way, if we're not told any information, we know for a fact that the king is down here. Now, okay, so you're saying knight g5 on move 2. Well, the problem is it's white to move and mate in 2. This is a checkmate in 2 puzzle. And so knight g5 being your second move might tell you where the king is, but it doesn't, deliver the checkmate. And with knight g5, perhaps a potential problem is, what if this king is on h5 and then moves to g6? No checkmate there, as far as I'm aware. And we're also not sure if the king is on g6, h5, or on c1 or d1 again. So yeah, knight g5 on move 1. Imagine the king is on h5 and king g6 is played. We would be told no information, and we would have no way to see if the king is on g6 or on the first rank. And you can't deliver checkmate to both at the same time. Queen d3. Okay, so now I'm going to start giving big things away, because we can sit here and play this guessing game all day. But I'm going to show you one wrong solution that will hopefully lead you to the correct solution. So, no one is utilizing all these beautiful pawns on the 7th rank. Why is nobody promoting these guys? So I am going to promote this pawn to a queen. And this is going to tell me a lot of information. Because if the king was on h8, I would be told that we have put the black king into check via a horizontal check. Now, of course, if the king were on h8, it would have to move to h7, and we could play queen g7 mate. That would be fantastic. If the king were on h7, it can no longer shuffle back to h8, and so it would have to capture on h6, in which case I can checkmate. And if we're told no information after queen to d8, then we know for a fact that the king is on the first rank, and we can play queen g1 mate. So d8 queen seemingly is effective at eliminating all of the potential moves for black, right? We know exactly where it's going to be. Either black will capture on c5, black will capture on h6, or we will not be told any information and the black king is on the first rank. Against king c5, we have queen c3 mate. Against king takes h6, we have queen h8 mate. And if king h8 to h7, we know it's on h7 because we put the king into check and we deliver checkmate. So there you go. Seems to be the perfect solution to everything. But what is the problem with d8 queen? Of course, d8 queen has a very nasty problem that makes it the incorrect solution. Who can find the idea? And yeah, Alex and perhaps Lauren in the chat as well both see the issue. And the issue is, if the king were on e1, And I can sort of show this to you. We're going to put the king over here on e1. I did set up some positions with the king. Then d8 queen would be stalemate, and that would be a puzzle failure. So d8 queen is not going to be good enough. So what's better than d8 queen, chat room? What's the solution to this puzzle? What happened with the king being on c4 or c6? Well, in the d8 queen scenario, the king on c4 or c6 would only have one legal move. That's to capture on c5, right? This king cannot go to any of these squares. This king cannot go to any of these squares. So both kings would end up on c5, and then we play queen c3 mate. So Jarrett says c8, Abhinav says c8, Siri says c8, Mitchell Walters says b8, d8 equals knight has been suggested. But of course, there is only one solution to this puzzle. So I'll let you guys at home think a little bit more about the difference between all of these pawn promotions. What is the solution to all of these pawn promotions? So yeah, I've eliminated one option for you. I've eliminated one option. d8 queen is not it. But between these three, only one promotion will work. So Jarrett has eliminated c8 because if the black king is on c4 and we play c8 queen, that is stalemate to the queen. So pawn to c8 equals queen has been eliminated. Stalemate if the king is on c6. Well, if the king's on c6, c8 queen would be checkmate, which is great. But if the king is on c4, then it is actually stalemate. So we cannot play c8 queen. So the question is, b8 or a8? Which one works and which one doesn't? So everybody's saying one of them, but why doesn't the other one work? So Aegis, actually, not quite, because you do get more information than that. Sorry if that wasn't clear. So the arbiter tells you that the black king is in check, and it actually tells you which direction it's in check from. So it'll say horizontal check or file check, rank check or file check. So you would be able to determine for that. But as Pippa now says, and plenty of people in the chat, if the king were on a1, then b8 queen would in fact be a draw. So this one that I already had set up actually is why b8 queen will not work. So that leaves us with a8 queen as our solution, and that is actually the only way to force mate in 2 no matter where this black king is. So really difficult puzzle, these Kriegspiel puzzles. I really enjoy them though. They're fun to wrap your head around. So just to show you a few possibilities, if the king were on a1, we would play a8 queen, king b1 would be played. We would not know where the king is for certain, but we would know that the king is on the first rank, and we could play queen g1 check, checkmate with confidence. If the king were over on c4, we play a8 queen. Black has no legal moves aside from capturing this bishop. Now, since our bishop has disappeared, we know the king's on c5, and we play queen to c3 checkmate. And one more, if we play a8 equals queen, and king takes h6 is played, regardless from where it started, now we have queen h8 mate. And just to show you the final one, if the king is on h8 and we play a8 queen, we are told horizontal check, king h7 is the only legal move, and we follow this up with queen to g7 mate. Checkmating this king no matter where he started from. So really fun puzzle. I really enjoy these Kriegspiel puzzles. If you guys want a fun challenge to take home with you, I'm going to leave you with 2 puzzles actually. This one is similarly a mate in 2, just like the one we just tried, same rules and everything. So I will leave you with this one and one more puzzle for you guys. This one is actually checkmate in 6 moves, white to move, checkmate in 6 moves. And here it's the same type of puzzle as the previous 2, but you know the king's starting position. So you don't know any of your opponent's following moves. You have to use this information gathering system to try and checkmate the king in 6 moves, no matter where your opponent has gone. Really difficult stuff, so let me know in the comments if you are able to solve these at home. Hopefully you enjoyed these interesting puzzles. They're wildly different from the chess puzzles we're all probably used to, but I have a lot of fun looking at these, thinking about these, and hopefully you did as well. If you're watching live, we do actually have another class coming up after this with Daro Swiertz, so stay tuned for that on the channel. But that is actually all I have for you tonight. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for melting your brains with me here tonight. As always, my name is Caleb Denby, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.